What is up, guys? It is Quinn here, and today I thought I would just hop on and run through a fantasy football mock draft. So I'm just going to be using the Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard. It's going to be a pretty standard setup. We're going PPR scoring, and then pretty normal like roster setup. One quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, a tight end, and then one flex. Not doing kicker or defense. I don't really see the point, if we're not doing like a legit fantasy football draft. And then for the draft position, we'll just come on here and randomize it. Not really trying to draft from a specific spot. We got the third pick. I'm cool with that. I really like any of like the first like four picks this year for fantasy. So let's jump into the draft. I'm guessing we're going to see Jonathan Taylor go off the board first, and then either McCaffrey or Cooper Kupp. Whichever one of those players is there at 3, that's the guy I'll be snagging here. I feel like the general consensus is that Jonathan Taylor goes at the 101, and then it's kind of up for grabs at the 102. But we actually see in this one CMC went at the 101 here, and then JT at the 102. Personally, I agree with this. CMC is my number one player, but it's not something that you see, super often. So that leaves us with Cooper Kupp here. This would honestly be between Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson. I would not hate if people took Jefferson here. Everything just seems to be lining up for him to go nuclear this season, but I just can't really pass up on Cooper Kupp. The man was just an absolute stud last season, balling out, one of the best wide receiver seasons of all time. So I typically like to go, running back early and often, but here at this spot, I feel like the running back value is just not there. So I'm going to lock up Cooper Kupp, and then we'll see who kind of falls to us here later in the second round. So pretty standard here. We saw a ton of running backs go off the board after Kupp. So Henry, Eckler, Harris, Cook, Swift, and then Mixon. We actually saw Jefferson and Chase go at the 110, 111. I feel like that is crazy value there. Then we saw Devontae Adams and Diggs go at the turn, Kelsey, Debo, and then a bunch of these running backs went from the 204 to the 209. Hopefully we still have a decent running back available for us. Not sure if we're going to see that. We may have to pivot and either go tight end or wide receiver. So yeah, running back is not going to be it at this point in the draft. I'm not trying to reach on a guy like James Conner. If Conner's available in the third, I'll consider taking him there. But it looks like we're going to be choosing between either Mark Andrews or a wide receiver here. So the options would be CeeDee Lamb or Mike Evans. Those are like the guys I have in the tier right there. I feel like we already have one wide receiver in Cooper Kupp. I feel like we lock up the positional advantage here with Mark Andrews. I also feel like the way this draft is kind of trending, if we do not get a running back in the third round, this is going to be a draft where we kind of punt the running back position for a little bit. So if that is the case, since we don't have a ton of flex spots here, I'm fine, getting a major upgrade here, like a high upside player at the tight end position. Hopefully Connor's there in the third round, or maybe we'll consider, one of these wide receivers that I already talked about. Let's take a look at who went at the 2-3 turn. So we actually saw 3 wide receivers, Lamb, Evans, Hill, and then Josh Allen went at the 302. So James Conner still on the board. We'll still take a look at the other positions to see what's up. Wide receiver, I think Keenan Allen and T. Higgins are fine picks here, but I do want to lock up a running back in the spot. Way too early for quarterback, in my opinion. And then the fall off from James Conner to in my opinion, it would be like Breece Hall, Travis Etienne. I feel like Conner kind of leads those guys. Plus, it's possible Etienne or Hall are available in the fourth round. So we're going to lock up James Conner here. Some people seem to be fading Conner a little bit. I don't really see the huge difference between a guy like James Conner and Leonard Fournette. I feel like people think he was super touchdown dependent last year, so he's going to regress. And he was touchdown dependent last year, but he was also in a backfield where he was sharing touches with Chase Edmonds. It's possible the dude is just a straight up workhorse. And if that happens, he's going to be a crazy value here at the 303. So kind of typical draft picks here in the third and fourth rounds. Ton of wide receivers went off the board, a few tight ends. We saw, a few running backs thrown in there also. And then, Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert. But what I did not see was Breece Hall or Travis Etienne picked. That is great news for me. We're still going to check out the other positions, but I love Breece Hall and Travis Etienne at this spot. They're honestly players that I have ranked late third round. I don't really love taking them in that spot, but I do think you could argue it, especially if, people are super sharp, picking in the first 3.5 rounds, or I guess it would be 2.5 rounds. So I think it's still too early for quarterback. There's going to be value later on. Running backs, Travis Etienne, Breece Hall. Those are the two guys I'm looking at. I don't think Metcalf is bad at this spot or Marquise Brown, but I think the clear pick here would be Travis Etienne or Breece Hall. Honestly, I feel like you could go with either of these guys. I believe I have them back-to-back in my rankings. I do think I favor Breece Hall here. I don't know. I feel like I just am a little bit more optimistic on this Jets offense. I think both players are kind of in similar situations, young offenses, potential competition, but I don't really think, it's legit competition for either player. We're going to roll with Breece Hall, but they're close enough in my rankings where, if I'm in this spot again, I'll probably go with ETN just to kind of balance out my shares. So let's take a look at who was picked. Right now, our roster is looking like James Conner and Breece Hall at running back, Cooper Kupp at wide receiver, and then Mark Andrews at tight end. So after Breece Hall, we saw Dobbins and ETN get picked, then Mike Williams and Darren Waller. So at this spot, we're kind of wide open to go in a variety of spots. Hypothetically, we could go quarterback. I don't think I'm going to do that. My kind of philosophy for quarterbacks this season is I'm fine taking one of the elite guys like Lamar or Kyler, but they're going to have to fall to me. So if one of those guys is available in like the 6th round, I'll snag them. If not, I will wait. If a guy like Jalen Hurts falls, I'll take him. If not, I'll kind of just punt the position, take one of the last guys like Stafford, Russ, Brady, whichever one of those guys falls, or I will just snag Trey Lance in the same range, who I think is an insane value. And if we miss out on Lamar, Kyler Hurts, he's probably the guy we're going to end up with in this draft. Running backs, Josh Jacobs, Elijah Mitchell, not super interested at this price. So we're back to the wide receiver position, and this is going to be between probably DK Metcalf and Marquise Brown. Honestly, I can't remember what player I have ranked higher. They're both very, very close in my rankings. I think I'm just going to go with DK Metcalf here. I feel like the value is kind of insane on him this season. I understand he loses Russ, but this is still a player who is an insanely talented wide receiver. The dude is just a stud, so I think he's going to produce, whether Russ is there or not. Obviously, it's a drop-off for him in terms of his ceiling, but I still think he can be, a solid, definitely solid wide receiver too, especially if you're getting him in the 5th round. I really like that value. So in the 5th and 6th round, we saw a ton of wide receivers come off, some quarterbacks thrown in there. It doesn't look like we're going to get one of the elite guys. We saw Hurts, Lamar, Burrow, Kyler all go off. TJ Hawkinson went in that range, and then Josh Jacobs and Elijah Mitchell. So once again, we're kind of wide open here. We're basically closed off at the tight end position with Mark Andrews. But other than that, quarterback, I said we'll probably snag later. This could really be a running back or a wide receiver. I'm not really loving the players we have at running back here, like 6th round A.J. Dillon or Miles Sanders. That doesn't sound great to me, but I do really like the value at wide receiver here. Guys like Darnell Mooney and Rashad Bateman, those are probably my clear top 2. Honestly, this is a spot where I've kind of just alternated. I talked about, the Breece Hall, Travis Etienne situation. I kind of feel similar with Mooney and Bateman. So in the last few drafts I've done, I think I've snagged Bateman over Mooney. I do believe they're back-to-back in my rankings. So at this price, I'll go after Mooney, just to kind of balance out my shares. But I feel like both of those players are decent picks here. I just think Mooney has a very solid floor. He's the clear best wide receiver in this offense, but he has the upside of just being an absolute target monster, which I think is very possible when you look at all the bums the Bears have at quarterback. As a Bears fan, living in Chicago, Mooney is really the only competent wide receiver on that roster, so I just think he's going to be peppered with targets. They may be inefficient, but he's still going to be getting the opportunities. And it looks like we may actually have a shot at getting Rashad Bateman also, because after we picked Darnell Mooney, we saw Goddard come off, then Brady, also Lockett and Renfro thrown in there. So we may have our guy here. That would be leaving us with 4 wide receivers, 2 running backs. I'm honestly pretty fine with that setup. I think on a lot of my rosters, I'm going to be rocking double hero RB. And what I mean by that is kind of like 2 key running backs, then kind of fade in the position for a while. It's not going to be something that's locked and loaded. If there's value there, I will totally take it. But it's kind of just been the way drafts have kind of played out. In my opinion, 1st round, 2nd round, I think the value is solid on running backs. Early 3rd, potentially on some platforms. Once you get later 3rd, 4th round, unless you're picking the Breece Halls or the Travis Etiennes, I feel like the value just totally craters, and that's when wide receivers kind of pop up here. So I think we're going to go back to the well on the wide receiver position. I'm fading quarterback, snagging Trey Lance later on. If Lance goes, I'm totally fine to settle on a guy like Stafford, Russ, or Dak, whichever player is remaining. What's really nice about the quarterback position this season is I personally believe there are 12 very solid starting options. So if you're in a 12-person league, you basically just have to pick your first quarterback. Like if you're waiting for quarterback, you just have to pick your first one before the teams in front of you start picking their second. So you can really get some crazy value when you have people reaching for like Brady and Burrow in like the 6th round. You can wait back, take a Stafford in like the 9th round, and the value is just absurd. So let's take a look at the draft board. Right now we're rocking 2 running backs, 4 wide receivers. We got Mark Andrews at tight end. Quarterback position is open. We are going to keep it like that. So the wide receivers here, the one guy who clearly sticks out to me is Treylon Burks. I think his value has definitely fallen way too far, but I also think there are some strong options here at running back. We have Kareem Hunt, Rashad Penny, Cordero Patterson, Melvin Gordon. A lot of interesting options here. This is honestly a spot where I think I may go running back. I think my best player available here would be Treylon Burks, but he'd be sliding in as my wide receiver 5. I think there's a chance we can snag him at the turn here in the 9th round. I'm going to take a look at the team picking in front of me, kind of take a look at their roster construction. So actually, they're pretty balanced. 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and a quarterback. So they could basically go in any direction here. So Burks may not be safe, from being drafted, but I still think we're going to go running back here. We've got Kareem Hunt, Rashad Penny, Patterson, Gordon. I think I favor Kareem Hunt at this spot. He's in a weird position where he could get cut by the Browns. If he's with the Browns and stays, I feel like he's definitely a value at this price. He's proven to perform better than a mid-tier RB3. If he gets cut, it's possible he doesn't land in the perfect spot, but I feel like you're looking at a few options. He could be the workhorse of like a bad team. He could be in a committee on a good roster. I just think he's a talented player. So however he kind of ends up, however the situation shakes out, I feel like he's going to be in a decent spot. And having him as my RB3, in the late 8th round, I think the value is there for that. And it looks like we may have gotten lucky and can snag Treylon Burks here because the team's after us. Actually, I didn't even realize there was a second team in there who could have snagged him. I just looked at the last team. But we had Patterson, Gordon, Penny, Christian Kirk come off the board. Good thing we snagged Kareem Hunt because they went running back heavy with those picks. So in my opinion, this is pretty clear cut. I still think we're safe from either Stafford or Lance being picked, just at this current price. Somehow Dalton Schultz is still on the board. That's actually absurd. But we have Mark Andrews, so it's kind of something I don't really want to mess with here. But the fact that he's fallen that far is wild. You normally see him going like 6th, 7th round. So the 903 is absurd value. But we're going to lock down Treylon Burks here. We could pick Dalton Schultz, and then, the argument would be like, okay, I'll trade him once the season starts. That's fine, but this is like a mock draft. So I kind of just want to see, the best team going into week 1. So that's how we're going to run it. If it was a real draft, you may take the value on that and then try to use him as trade bait. But, we're just trying to get a solid roster here from the get-go. So we go with Treylon Burks there. Let's see who came off the board. Really a huge mix of players. We saw Stafford come off, so Trey Lance is still available. A bunch of tight ends, some wide receivers, some running backs. So a strong mix. I feel like this is the spot where we may just want to lock up Trey Lance. With Trey Lance here, it's possible there's a team who picked like a later QB1, but they see the upside of Lance and just want to pair him as a QB2. So I feel like we've already kind of squeezed the value out. I just want to lock him down because I don't really want to lose him here. I think the drop-off between Lance to like Rodgers, Carr, Cousins is pretty severe. So we're going to snag Trey Lance here, and that's going to wrap up our starting lineup. So we've got Lance, Connor, Hall, Kupp, Metcalf, Andrews, and Mooney, and then Bateman, Hunt, and Burks on the bench. So now, rest of the draft, I guess we could get a second quarterback. I personally don't think I'm going to, but right now we've got, 3 running backs, 5 wide receivers, so 3 more bench slots. We're probably looking at at least 1 more running back, maybe 2 more, and then maybe 1 more wide receiver. If there's some value elsewhere, I'll consider it. But right now, this is pretty open to going either direction. So running backs available, Ronald Jones, McKissick, Spiller, Wide receivers, Boyd, Landry, Galladay, MVS, Sky Moore. All right, so Sky Moore is definitely the pick here. He's the guy that I will just be smashing at this price. 11th round for like a dude who has legit chance to be the potential wide receiver one on the Chiefs. Like, we've got to lock that down. Loved him as a prospect. Juju hasn't impressed, the last few years. Hasn't really gotten a ton of buzz out of camp. I think MVS is good at his role, but he's incredibly one-dimensional. I think Sky Moore can do it all, so he is going to be the very strong pick here. Feel very good about that selection. So that leaves us with like 6 wide receivers, and I feel pretty solid about them. A lot of young guys, but that's okay. So we'll kind of see where this takes us. Looking at the draft board to see who went later in the 11th and then early 12th round, we saw a ton of these running backs come off. So our RB4 may be looking a little weak. A ton of these like handcuff, potential upside with injury guys, a few wide receivers, quarterback, and then a few tight ends thrown in there. So here's our 12th round pick. We have 2 selections left. We may just want to, snag potentially 2 running backs, handcuff options, or if there's someone at wide receiver we like, we can go there also. Looking at the running backs, Jamal Williams, don't love it. Gus Edwards, maybe. This honestly, Ty Davis Price going down here, I think is probably the pick, but I do think we can get him next round. The question is, do I go with Jameson Williams, who I think is probably the best value pick? I think I may pass on that just because I think our wide receivers are pretty stacked right now. So I could go with a guy like Gus Edwards, potential RB2 on the Ravens, super strong rushing attack. He's going to be the guy behind J.K. Dobbins. They like to consistently use 2 backs. We'll see about the ACL. Don't really know how that's going to shake out, but he'll be the pick. And then to wrap it up, going with my guy Ty Davis Price. The 49ers backfield is always a mystery, so I'm fine taking a swing on like their 3rd round pick this year. Obviously, Mitchell was really solid last season, but they did feel the need to go out, spend draft capital on Ty Davis Price. I think it's possible he has some kind of role, even if Mitchell's on the field and then possesses like that handcuff thing. So kind of a situation where he's like a super weak flex play on a week-to-week basis, but then has upside with a Mitchell injury. So this is our final team. Ignore the grade. It just kind of grades you on how well you followed their ADP. So quarterback Treylon, crazy value in my opinion. Maybe a little bit risky, but the rushing upside gives him a crazy ceiling. Running backs, James Conner, Breece Hall. Feel solid about those guys. Wide receiver, Cooper Kupp. Wide receiver 1. And then we have DK Metcalf, Mark Andrews at tight end. Elite tight end option. Darnell Mooney in the flex. I think our bench is really strong, especially the first 4 players. Rashad Bateman, Kareem Hunt, Treylon Burks, Sky Moore, Gus Edwards, and then Ty Davis Price. So that's the roster. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Would you have made some different picks? How do you feel about the team? Let me know. If you want me to do, a different kind of setup, settings, drop those down below. I'll try to do as many as I can. Going to start ramping up these mock drafts throughout the offseason, as we get closer to opening day, I guess, or week 1, however you want to call it. But thank you all for stopping by. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all in the next one.